Welcome to The More Perfect Union, the podcast that offers real debate without the hate. I'm Rebecca Cushmiter, and I am pleased to once again share the mic with my dignified and intelligent compatriots, Kevin Kelton.
Yes, hi, this is Kevin. Just back just a few hours ago from my first vacation in months. Went to Northern California, where the weather is fine, and so are the girls, at least the girl that I was with.
Yeah, see, is it fair to compare the girls to the one that you brought on purpose? Like, you brought the best one.
Yes, like, it is fair.
It is fair. They all pale by comparison.
Jessica made them all pale by comparison.
And DJ McGuire?
Yes, and I'd like to thank our sponsors, Steve Carlton, Ron Swoboda, and the score 14-12.
No one knows except me, because I read your article, DJ. Why don't you very, very briefly describe what you just were referring to?
Those are debate metaphors. Steve Carlton was a strikeout machine as a pitcher for the 70s and 80s. Ron Swoboda was one of the few hitters who actually had his number. And the score 14-12, I will explain later.
Okay.
All right. So speaking of debates, we had one this past week. I know that feels a little like it happened in the Paleolithic era, but I assure you it was less than a week ago as we record this. It is Sunday night. So the two vice presidential candidates faced off. Oh, I have a take on it, but I want to hear what DJ has to say first.
So this was a debate where the person who looked like they were going to win lost because of some very big mistakes. To give anybody an idea of what the hell I was talking about earlier, there's a game in 1969, the year the Mets went all the way to win the World Series. And one of the reasons they were able to do this was because they actually won a game despite having 19 strikeouts. Steve Carlton was the pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals at the time. And in September 15th, 1969, Steve Carlton broke the record at the time for strikeouts in a 9-inning game by throwing 19 strikeouts. But he made two mistakes. Each one led to a 2-run homer by Ron Swoboda of the Mets. And because the Cardinals' offense was terrible and they could only plate 3 runs, Steve Carlton broke the strikeout record while losing 4-3. That was the VP debate. J.D. Vance was racking up the yardage. He was smooth. He was slick. He made his lies sound like truth if you weren't paying close enough attention. But he had 2 very bad moments that wiped all that out. First was when he tried to turn illegal alien into aliens that we just don't like, in reference to the Haitians in Springfield, who he insisted were illegal because what he really meant was he didn't like the way the Biden administration made them legal, which is not the same thing as illegal, by the way. And he was called on that by the CBS moderator, at which point he complained, and he said essentially the rules were that there would be no fact checking.
And all I could picture was Chevy Chase as Gerald Ford. I was told that there would be no math.
No math.
Yes, yeah. No math. But to anybody who didn't know the Chevy Chase scene, he just looked like a whiner. Either way, that meme is still with us 5 days later, and maybe just but the only thing anyone remembers about the debate. For those of us who are policy wonks, the other big mistake he made was when he refused to acknowledge that Joe Biden won the 2020 election.
He was looking towards the future, DJ.
Yes, he was looking toward the future while complaining about COVID censorship 4 years ago. So he basically revealed to everyone that he is just another Trump sycophant, no matter what his flowery words are. And whatever trust he may have built up and didn't piss away with the no fact-checking moment was just gone after that one. So that even though Waltz was clearly clumsier, even though he clearly had a harder time with it, because of those 2 moments, J.D. Vance lost the debate to Tim Walz.
What do you think, Kevin?
Well, I'm saying this with a big, big smile on my face. This is tongue-in-cheek because the last time DJ and I disagreed on who won or who lost the debate, it did not go well. So I'm going to tread very carefully and say, I think I saw it slightly differently. My take is that Vance won on technical debate points, I think he looked better. And I don't think DJ would disagree with this. I think he looked a little bit more slick, a little bit smoother than Tim Walz. I think Governor Walz's mannerisms, his eyes that tend to pop out, made him look like a deer in the headlights. He did not, in my opinion, start that strong. However, I think that Governor Walz ended strong. So while I would say if I had to pick a quote unquote winner in the debate, I would probably say just by a couple of points, maybe J.D. Vance. However, given that 90% of his answers were lies, and Governor Walz was called on one or two things that he said in the past where he did stretch the truth, not the same thing. And I'm going to just go one step further on that. You know, everybody's making a big deal out of this China comment of his, where he said he had been in Tiananmen Square during the big protest, and it turns out that he had arrived in China some 8 weeks later. And people are calling that like this gotcha moment, this big lie. You know, to me, that's a big fish story. That's a fisherman's story. There's a lot of people who say I was there when maybe they weren't quite there. I would venture to guess there are millions and millions of people who claim to have been at the fall of the Berlin Wall because they were there 2 weeks before or 2 weeks after.
Oh, that would be me. Yes. I was at the fall of the Berlin Wall. If by the fall of the Berlin Wall, you mean it happened in February and I was there in July.
Exactly. But a lot of people claim to have been at the fall of the Berlin Wall. Anyways, I'm going on a tangent a little bit. But my point is that I don't think that is anywhere near the level and the audacity of the lies that Senator Vance told in that debate.
Yeah, I mean, I was joking. My take on it is, of course, J.D. Vance was very smooth. You can be very smooth when you're not constrained by the truth. You know, when you can say whatever you want, whatever weird ass idea comes into your mind without having to try and figure out how to, cite sources or verify facts. Yeah, so you sound great. And I love Tim Walz as much as the next liberal, but at some point, SNL is going to do a skit where they have a counter on the bottom of the screen counting how many times the Tim Walz impersonator says the word Minnesota. And Tim's going to deserve it because he kept bringing up Minnesota. And normally that's actually a very good debate tactic to talk about your accomplishments in your home state. And it wouldn't have looked so odd if J.D. Vance had any accomplishments to talk about. He doesn't, so he didn't. So he was very theoretical, and it made Tim Walz look a little more provincial. I don't think it harmed him tremendously, but it did definitely make him look like a governor as opposed to a national figure.
You mentioned SNL, and I think probably the greatest luck for Tim Walz is something horribly macabre, and that's that Chris Farley is dead.
Oh, but you're right.
Because if Chris Farley had survived to 2024, he probably would have looked a lot like Tim Walz.
Oh my God.
It would have been effing perfect.
Oh, but Tim Walz would have loved it. Like he would have been.
Walz would have thought it was hilarious.
He would have been trying to find a way to go and be on SNL with Chris Farley. You know, he's the kind of guy who can take the joke.
He would have been like Bush and Dana Carvey.
Yes.
But unfortunately, we did not get that moment because Chris Farley passed away so many years ago.
Well, SNL did do a very funny impression of Tim Walz. A comedian named Jim Gaffigan played him in the first episode. I guess you guys didn't see that, but it was pretty spot on. So he was covered in that way.
Oh, excellent. I mean, Walz he lends himself to lighthearted, good-hearted imitation. So I think we all agree that there was a debate. It probably didn't move any needles. You know, it didn't make me think, well, if Trump croaks in the middle of his term, at least we've got this guy coming up behind. I didn't find J.D. Vance reassuring at all. Looking forward towards the future, like J.D. Vance, DJ, we've got Kamala Harris stepping up the media game. She is going to be on 60 Minutes tomorrow night. She has an upcoming appearance on Howard Stern, an upcoming appearance on The View. And she just did a podcast called Call Her Daddy, I believe, which is like the Joe Rogan for women, but smarter, probably. What do you guys think? Is this the right moment for her to be doing these big media hits?
Well, the right moment would have been 3 weeks ago, but she's doing them now, and that's fine.
I'm not so sure how beneficial it would have been if she had started in mid-September. It doesn't really matter because she's starting now. And more to the point, she is, instead of doing the traditional, well, I mean, 60 Minutes is traditional media, but she is also doing the non-traditional media that Donald Trump has been doing for a while, and basically trying to show up on every white supremacist man under 30 podcast to basically get that constituency all riled up. Harris is now, hitting all of her constituencies in the social media world, in the podcast world, and that is good. And it will probably I think it will have a greater impact now because it is October, and because we're now at the point where what few undecideds left are going to start paying attention. I think there are really two groups of undecideds. And it's not undecided between Harris and Trump. I think there are a bunch of undecideds between voting for Harris or not voting at all, either from the right or from the left. And, they will now get their chance to see her and get to make up their minds whether they vote for Harris or choose not to vote. So, I think she's doing what she has to do. And I think Trump is doing what he has to do, which is don't come anywhere near any media at all. Because the more people see of him, the less they like him. And even he knows that now.
And we have been in kind of the classic Trump trap the past couple of weeks, where the coverage has been all about Trump, and he has been sucking the oxygen out of the room again. And that's to all of our detriment, because it for the people who hate him, it's a turnoff and it makes them not want to participate in politics. To the people who love him, it bolsters his appeal, and it keeps Kamala Harris out of the national conversation, which is she needs to be the topic of the national conversation. So I think that going on The View, going on 60 Minutes, going on Howard Stern is a great way to, seize a bit of the spotlight at a moment where she really needs a spotlight.
I somewhat disagree. I think it's better for Democrats if Donald Trump is the focus of conversation. The problem is that the campaign and the media are trying to torpedo him with kind of glib things like now it's his age, or the word salads, or his crowd sizes have diminished, or whatever other critiques they make of him that aren't really sticking because people just don't care about that stuff. I think that there are several real issues where Trump threatens his own supporters, even if they don't realize it. Meaning, if he gets elected, they will be much the worse for it. But these people need to be really taken by the hand and led down the logic path of why it will be to their detriment if they vote to elect Donald Trump. I just wrote a piece for our Substack that outlines 15 ways that Trump is threatening his own supporters just by running for president, and will harm them if he's elected. I'm going to just very quickly go through a couple of them. If you want to see the whole list, it's on Substack, MPU Podcast. Among them, he's going to turn the FBI and the DOJ into his personal investigative force. Okay, well, everybody knows that, but what's the problem with that? Hey, a lot of people would like to see him go after Joe Biden or Hunter Biden or Liz Cheney or Mitt Romney or whoever it is. The problem is it diverts resources from things like fighting terrorism, fighting drug cartels, organized crime, prosecuting civil rights abuses, fighting international money laundering, and other major criminal threats to America. So the more he uses the FBI and the DOJ to go after his enemies, the less resources and time they will have to do the things that we really need them to do. Everyone needs them to do, including Trump enthusiasts.
Well, that's sort of part of the overall Trump agenda, the Schedule F that he's been talking about, ways to diminish the federal workforce, fire civil servants, and replace them with his own loyalists. That will be a diminished amount of government service that affects us all negatively.
Yes, absolutely. Here's another way that he is threatening to harm to everyone, including his own supporters. He will give Israel free rein to attack Iran. Well, again, a lot of people say, yeah, Iran, bad. It's about time somebody dealt with them. Trump is really strong. The problem with that is it could draw the United States into a long-term regional war. And if Russia or China backs Iran in that war, we would be creating a superpower proxy war that would make the Ukraine war look like Grenada.
Yep.
Let me give you just a couple more. He wants to harass and prosecute his numerous political enemies using the FBI, the DOJ, and the IRS to extort revenge. The problem is, if he does that to, let's say he does that to a Liz Cheney, Joe Biden, maybe someone in the media, it's going to force the rest of his outspoken critics to flee the country, which will thereby increase his power and control over the laws and the culture and cut down on critiques of the presidency, which we desperately need to remain a democracy.
The problem with all those, Kevin, is that those are all forms of indirect harm. There are certain direct harm policies that Trump would enact, and then the Harris campaign is already talking about them. The tariffs he would impose, which would essentially be a $4,000 tax
on my list
on every household. Those are the kinds of things that are direct, and that will smack them all in the face. But again, it's one of these situations where a lot of voters don't vote for economic reasons. They vote for cultural reasons, or particularly they're voting against people they don't like. And that's what we are seeing, unfortunately, across most of the country. And they don't really care if they get hurt, so long as the people they hate get hurt more. It sucks. It's a lot to work through and to work against, but it's just where we are. So Trump is going to hurt a lot of his own voters, and he's going to do it in a lot of ways. And they're not going to care. In fact, if anything, they're going to consider it a noble sacrifice to make this country whiter, because to the extent that there's anything coherent about Trumpism, it is about making the country whiter at the expense of everything else.
Did you guys see the report? It was just this week that during the California wildfires in, I believe, 2018, he wanted to keep aid to California locked up because he was mad that he didn't have enough supporters there. Someone had to show him voter rolls from Orange County to prove that there were enough Republicans to make it worth his while to release federal wildfire aid. Not like his own personal accounts. Our taxpayer dollars that are supposed to help all the Americans who are facing disasters. He wanted to turn that into a partisan issue. And they had to use partisan arguments to win, and that wouldn't just hurt Democrats. If he decides that he doesn't want to help your county because it's a little too Democrat, there are also still Republicans there, and they're going to come to harm as well. You do not want a petty, vindictive, sectarian dictator deciding whether you are entitled to the benefits of citizenship or not.
Speaking of petty sectarian dictators, what about the guy that runs X, the website formerly known as Twitter?
That fucking guy. Did you guys see any of his joint appearance with Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania this weekend? Yeah, Elon Musk.
The musky odors of the GOP.
Musky odors emanating from the GOP, a distinct musky odor. He was with Trump this weekend in Butler, Pennsylvania, the site where Trump was attacked, nearly assassinated. I don't know what we're calling that one these days. The ear injury. And Musk looked higher than a kite. He was jumping and dancing. And I didn't listen to his speech because he's boring. But it occurred as I was watching the clips of this, I was thinking, my God, we spent all of 2016 nitpicking whether or not Hillary was likable enough. And we've got the pussy grabber in chief with Captain Horse for Handjob bargain marching around a stage like they're God's gift to politics, and we're supposed to just accept that and not acknowledge that they're repellent. And then you've got Elon's mother, who, is she a citizen? I'm not sure. But she was tweeting something about, if you want, everyone should just go to 10 different polling places on election day and drop off different provisional ballots, and that'll eventually overwhelm the system and all the provisional ballots will get counted. And that's not how it works. That's not how any of it works. It's just, you can't do that. They check the provisional ballots against voter registration rolls. You can't go in and say you're Mickey Mouse and get your vote counted. Doesn't work.
Look, when it comes to Elon Musk, he fails a very simple, if jarring, test. Elon Musk's father is married to his stepsister. I don't trust someone who is literally their own uncle.
So, speaking of the written word, fingertips, typing, Jack Smith published a bombshell report this week, 165 pages of legal descriptions of what happened in the weeks leading up to the election, the weeks following the election, and up to January 6th in 2020. Did you guys read it?
Yeah, I haven't read it. Like most people, I just read excerpts and some news
bits and
analysis.
bits and pieces.
I just want to clarify something. The word published, I mean, I don't want to be the grammar Nazi here. He submitted a brief to the court. The court made it public, not Jack Smith.
You're right.
A lot of people are saying, oh, Jack Smith did this to get Trump and to embarrass him in front of the election or to, interfere with the election. It was the judge in the case, Judge Chutkin, who made the decision to release it at this point in time.
And she did it without objection from Trump's legal team. They agreed to whatever level of redaction was in this version. And because they didn't object, she then hit submit or whatever you hit in the court system.
Right.
So it is out there with minimal redactions, many of which are very easy to translate. For example, when it says things like P9, the sitting governor of Georgia. Like, oh yeah, that's a puzzler.
Brian Kemp, obviously.
Brian Kemp. And I read about 2/3 of it the night it became public. And the narrative is so damning. It is so damning. And in a sane world, you would read it and think, my God, this was the vast right-wing conspiracy that we were warned about all those years ago. Even Neil Cavuto commented on it saying this reveals crimes, that Trump resorted to crimes. It's not really disputable that he was doing things that were illegal. And then what Jack Smith very masterfully did was explain how the crimes Trump committed were being committed by candidate Trump and could in no way be inferred to be official duties, including conversations with Mike Pence. And it was because nothing in the official delineation of the role of the president gives him any oversight over elections as a process. So everything he was doing was as a candidate.
I'm not going to hold my breath on this one, even if he does not win the election and even if he gets convicted by Jack Smith on these charges. I think the Supreme Court is going to find a way to overturn it. They're going to say, no, a president, ensuring that a national election was indeed fair and sound is part of his job description. I could see Justice Roberts writing that brief right now.
The problem with all of that is that the filing has numerous examples of Donald Trump admitting that he lost, being told there was nothing behind any of his accusations, literally him telling other people there didn't need to be anything behind the accusations. We'll figure the details later. You just tell the congressional Republicans to do something and I'll worry about the details, all this other kind of stuff.
And it was happening in advance of the election. He was saying that he will declare victory regardless of what the election night counts looked like. He was saying that prior to the election. So he wasn't ensuring a free and fairly executed election by saying that in private meetings.
Right. Now, it is quite likely that we have two Supreme Court justices who believe the big lie, who can't get themselves off the big lie, which means Chief Justice Roberts is dealing with two wackos in his midst. So I don't know how we will handle that.
No, we've seen how he'll handle it. He capitulates to them. That's very predictable.
That's what he's done so far.
But the thing that struck me when I was reading through this is that Jack Smith was not willing to roll over and take the broadest definition of presidential duties as sort of thrown at the wall like so much proverbial spaghetti by the Supreme Court. He was surgically excising the role of the candidate from the role of the president. And was
well,
very
that's what they asked him to do.
Right. And he was doing it in an exemplary manner and in a way that it is very hard to argue that he was being too broad with his judgments. And it became I thought, a masterful legal pushback to this idea of presidential immunity that could give judges at other points in the judiciary pause.
Well, I hope you're right. So what else might be in the news this week?
Apparently, Kamala Harris performed a transgender surgery on a felon.
This was mine. I'm trying to. This is me trying to sort out how much of an impact this will be, particularly on undecided voters or whatever. Now, on certain issues, I've always sort of fallen over left, even when I was a Republican, and transgender issues happen to be one of them. So maybe I have a political blind spot here.
Wait, you don't care what other people do with their genitalia? Amazing, DJ.
It's not something that I worry about. But the notion that a prison policy regarding gender reassignment surgery in California, while Kamala Harris was Attorney General, that would be something that most Americans would think had a dramatic and tremendous effect on their lives it's just not something that computes for me. I'm not seeing how that could be something that could get a majority of Americans to decide, oh, yes, I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. I'm just missing something. I'm missing something here. What makes them think that kind of ad is going to work? Because I'm having trouble seeing it, which must mean I'm missing something.
What you're missing is that people will believe it. His base voters, who they are trying to turn out en masse, would buy it.
No, hold it. That's not the point. Because it actually happened. It's not whether it's not true or not. It is true that this was the policy. My point is, why is that happening? How is that event?
They're calling it fiscal mismanagement, that you are spending taxpayer dollars on gender confirmation care for felons. Money that could be spent to, I don't know, put more locks on schools so school children aren't shot. That was J.D. Vance's plan. Better windows.
Basically, because the majority of Americans, possibly, and the overwhelming majority of Trump supporters are so innumerate as to think that a gender reassignment surgery has a dramatic effect on the taxpayer bottom line, that they're just willing to go into a froth for it and vote for Trump.
Yes, that's what some people, because they think they'll just be doing gender reassignment surgeries on everybody in prison, and this cost will spiral out of control.
Yeah, it's going to be, hey, they're paying thousands of dollars to cut the penises off of prisoners so that they can get into a women's prison. But the good people of Western North Carolina only get $750 because their house floated away. That's what they'll say. And
Trump is still standing up on stage saying the whole story about, imagine your child goes to school, you say goodbye, little Jimmy, and they come back 3 days later having had a brutal operation and they're now a girl.
Yeah.
He's still saying that.
That is how stupid he believes the American people are.
Clearly they've got some, dial focus group where they like, oh, yeah. They get really excited when he says stuff like that. So they just keep saying it. And apparently they're also saying things like illegal citizens. Are these the ones who are going to polling places and dropping off 10 provisional ballots? Deej, where did you see this and what happened?
This is something else I noticed. It was said at one of the Trump rallies. It wasn't Trump himself, but somebody said, if you're an illegal citizen and you vote, we will find you and we will deport you.
The quote I heard was, Trump said, if you vote illegally, you will go to jail. To which someone on Twitter replied, but if you vote legally, he will go to jail.
It only works if you follow that. And this is actually something Stephen Miller has been talking about essentially a denaturalization program that they have in mind, to take people that became citizens in a way they didn't like and make them not citizens again, so they can kick them out of the country.
There's already a process for that.
Yes, I know. And they're going to put it on steroids.
Yeah. It's like they don't, I know a friend of mine is a lawyer at DOJ and actually oversees some cases like that. But it's like, if you come here, become a citizen, and then start trafficking humans, like if you commit major crimes, they will revoke your citizenship. But it's not, they don't do it because you look funny.
Yeah.
But it's just another reminder that when they say illegal, it basically means people they don't like. Again, the Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, who've actually revitalized the town, are actually legal immigrants who came through on a particular government program. Trump and Vance don't like that government program, so they're declaring the program illegal, and thus they're declaring anyone who took advantage of it illegal.
Weren't Haitians given the TPS status under Bush the Younger?
This is a particular one that I think was driven by the, or at least in part, either by the earthquake of 2010 or by the complete collapse of the central government in 2021 when the president was assassinated.
No, because the earthquake I remember because that was a huge Clinton initiative.
Yeah.
They went in to do a lot of the aid there, and I was thinking, okay.
But the main point is, to Trump and Vance, illegal now means anybody we don't like.
Right.
It doesn't mean what actually would have been considered illegal in the aughts of the 90s or even the 10s. It's anybody we don't like and we want kicked out of the country. We're going to kick them out of the country.
It's anybody who came to this country that we can scapegoat.
Yeah, it's anybody who came to the country after Stephen Miller's grandparents were brought here in their caskets of Transylvanian dirt.
So we've discussed Trump and the election to death. What else is in the news that we can end on maybe a more of a high point?
It seems like pop culture is finally catching up and getting a little bit funny. So, Kevin, have you got some news for us?
Have I got news for you? Did you guys know that CNN has a comedy show now? Their first original comedy show.
Who do they have writing it? Have you looked at the writers list to see if it's anybody good?
Well, I always look at the writing credits. I didn't notice any names that jumped out at me. They're probably fine writers. The show itself is hosted by a very fine comedian, Roy Wood Jr., who comes out of The Daily Show. He's great, but unfortunately the material is not supporting him. They may have news for you, but what they don't have is a lot of laughs for you.
Oh, dear.
And I hate to be catty about television programs. I've worked on some dogs myself, and SNL, which I played a tiny part in its history, certainly goes through its up and down years and is never 100% the laugh riot that it's billed to be. But this show is not even a laugh mild disturbance, let alone a laugh riot.
Not even a laugh tango, a laugh waltz.
It's not a laugh tango. It's not a laugh waltz. All I can say is, having now seen parts of 3 episodes, I think I can say with confidence that we will not be celebrating its 50th anniversary, and I highly doubt we'll be celebrating its first anniversary.
This is actually not original. BBC actually has Have I Got News for You?
Yeah.
They did this before anybody else did. And it does not surprise me that CNN, 1, is trying to do a riff of a British comedy show, and 2, that they do it badly. Because CNN is not supposed to be about comedy, goddammit. Knock it the hell off.
I mean, theoretically, you could always hire good writers to make comedy happen. I guess CNN doesn't have that kind of budget.
No, sometimes it's the premise. The premise sometimes fights you even with good writers.
One of my proudest moments as a parent was when my son had written an essay, he was in 6th grade, about Sparta at Athens for his history class. And he was really proud of it. He read it aloud to me, and it was all very funny and very sharp and actually very correct. And at the end of it, he wrote, "I hope my casual tone is okay. I was trying to write it in the tone of a Daily Show monologue."
Good for him. Good for him.
So my 6th grade son was trying to imitate Trevor Noah for history class. And I've always felt really good about that.
And the fact of the matter is, CNN does have comedic moments. Just anytime Scott Jennings opens his mouth, it's a laugh riot.
So thank you all for listening to another trip down campaign superhighway with us. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy what we do here, follow us on Instagram at MPU Fan Club and our Substack page where we publish opinion pieces and really deep cuts into the history of baseball. And DJ, did you just know that? Are you a walking baseball almanac, or did you have to Google parts of it?
That was something I read about when I was a kid, and I had this gigantic, history of baseball thing that I got for my birthday or something. And that one just stuck with me because it was
Oh my
just,
God. It's a core
record-breaking
memory.
loser moment. Yeah.
Yep.
I can't claim to remember it, but I did live through it, and I now, having been reminded of it, do remember it.
Well, if you want to read about both sports and politics, and the fact that we are all tremendous nerds, check out our Substack page. And don't forget to share our link and our Substack posts on all of your social media feeds so that your friends can discover us as well. As always, we thank Alan Keeney for our theme music. And all right, the big 60 Minutes interview is tomorrow evening. What snacks do you plan to consume while you watch Kamala Harris?
Well, I will be probably snacking on Junior Mints because, like Kamala Harris, they're always refreshing.
And I might be on a PTA call. Shit. I should not have agreed to be on the boards of so many PTAs this year. It's really cutting into my Tuesday nights. Oh, well. Try to be a responsible parent, and look what happens.